everyone. Welcome to another weekly live stream with me, Dr. Sarah Webb of Colorism Healing. As always, I'm excited to be here as you all tune in. Be sure to say hello. Let me know where you're tuning in from. Let me know where you're located now. So we have a slight change of plans for today. My guest had to postpone or reschedule. So be on the lookout for when we'll be able to reschedule my talk with Tanzania Fair, founder of Sisterpreneurs and other great things, a very accomplished young woman. So I definitely look forward to chatting with her, but we'll have to reschedule it. So you just get me today, I know, but hopefully we'll have a good discussion. And so what I'm going to do is kind of do a live Q&A. Again, I haven't done just a pure Q&A in a long time. And there are a couple of issues that have come up like in messages and comments recently that I'm going to kind of address. But it's going to be a casual day, you know, like a last minute change of plans, which is cool. I like to go with the flow. You know, I'm a Gemini, so I kind of, you know, am flexible. I'm mutable that way. But before we jump in, I do have a few announcements. Hello from Utah. Welcome. Hey, Poetic Platypus. Nice to see you all. The first one is that the Colorism Healing Writing Contest. So we've gotten results from one of our judges so far. So we're that much closer to announcing the results of the contest. Really excited. And then I'm also reading all the submissions myself, you know, looking at who's going to be an editor's pick. And just really basking in that. And I can't wait to share those and put them online and put them in the book when they're all done so you all can read them as well. And thank you again to everyone who submitted and participated. Thank you so much for sharing your story. Another really big thing that's happening today that I'm super excited about is I'm doing an Instagram takeover. Yes. For Firefly Inclusion Solutions, LLC. So they are a DEI consulting firm. And I was recently featured on their podcast too. Juana and Jason are great podcast hosts, but also just really cool people. So I was happy to meet them and the other people that they work with. And so my focus for the takeover today and tomorrow is colorism in the workplace, right? So I'll be doing 2 lives this week. I'm doing this one today. And then on their page, on the Firefly page, I am doing a live tomorrow, Wednesday at noon, specifically on colorism in the workplace. And so really, I'm encouraging you all to go check out the Firefly page. I posted about it in my stories and on my IG page here. But I have an outline about how colorism manifests in the workplace. So if you're a manager or a supervisor or just like a really good coworker or a leader at work in some way, it's a really useful kind of starter kit for how to recognize colorism in the workplace, how to address it, the different ways it could impact your employees and your coworkers, but also the customers and the clients, right? So it can be colorism in terms of your marketing or your promotion, but also colorism in terms of management. And so I'm really excited to continue that conversation. I don't think I've talked about colorism in the workplace on this page. I know I talked about colorism in schools, colorism in families, you know, colorism in dating, although I need to do another segment on that. But colorism in the workplace is definitely a big one because we spend a majority of our days, most of us who work full time, spend so much time at work that if we're experiencing colorism, it can make work a very difficult, hostile environment to be in, right? And I've talked to people recently who have to deal with that on top of the regular stresses of being a person, being at work, being a person of color at work, being a woman at work, and then on top of that being the only dark-skinned person as well. And then the other thing I wanted to mention, so, you know, I'm launching my group coaching program, but I'm postponing the deadline from June 6th, which was my birthday. I was originally going to launch it at that time. But one, we're in Mercury retrograde during June 6th, and I don't want to launch a new thing like in the middle of a Mercury retrograde. So that's one of the reasons why I'm going to push it back. But also, I want to take the time to really gather a group of women who work well together, who have good chemistry, right? I don't want to rush to start it and just, you know, fill it with, random people, right? Like I want it to be the right people, a good mix of women. It is for dark-skinned women. And so I'm going to wait until I have the women who are ready to enroll and ready to begin, and then we're gonna decide what's a good time to start it together, right? And so instead of imposing like a strict start date, it's gonna be dependent on who signs up and when they're ready to begin. So those are my announcements. And if you're just tuning in, I did have a guest scheduled, Tanzania Fair of Sisterpreneurs. And she had to reschedule. So you're stuck with me today. And I'm going to do kind of a Q&A style. So get your questions or comments ready. If you've had burning questions about colorism that you've been wanting to talk about and you never have the chance to talk about them, drop them in the chat. This is a serendipitous day where I'll be able to have time to answer those. But I want to address, right, as you all are possibly thinking about your questions, I want to address some things that came up recently in comments and DMs here on IG and as well as TikTok. And the first one is, can white people be colorist, right? So white people and colorism. How does colorism work for white people, from white people, toward white people? And so a lot of times people make the false assumption that colorism can only happen between people of the same race, right? And so if it's someone outside of your race, then they can't be colorist towards you, which is actually not an accurate interpretation of what colorism means. And so when you look at definitions of colorism, a lot of times you see the word same race, right? But same race is about the people who are experiencing the discrimination, right? The person who's doing the discrimination, the person who's perpetuating it doesn't have to be the same race as you, right? So for example, I think of a school context, right? Where you have different students, right? A class of students, and they have a white teacher, for example. So you have a white teacher and she's teaching in a predominantly black and brown classroom. If that white teacher shows a favorable prejudice or favoritism towards the lighter skinned children, right? Towards the students with lighter skin or wavy hair or green eyes and blue eyes, right? Even though all those children are all black and brown or Latinx children, all the same races, the teacher would be distinguishing between those children based on their skin tone and their hair texture and their eye color, right? Not based on their race. And so even though she's a white teacher, she's not the same race as them, her prejudice is based on the relative skin tone, right? So if she's just punishing the darker skinned children more harshly, it's still colorism. And so I think it's important to know that white people can be colorists. And one reason why this is so important, and this goes back to my discussion of colorism in the workplace for the Firefly inclusion page, is that when you look at the statistics and the disparities and the pay gaps and the biases in hiring and the way that interviewers perceive the intelligence of people who are doing job interviews, right? And even again, if you look at the statistics of dark-skinned African-American girls being 3 times more likely to be suspended than black girls with very light skin tones, right? A lot of times it's white teachers who are doing that suspending. It's white teachers who are making the differentiation there. And so even if the person who's perpetuating colorism is a different race, it's still colorism if their bias is not based on your race per se, but how you look specifically. And the other thing that came up with that conversation, or in a related conversation, is that I've even had white people say, like people in European countries, right? People are from Eastern Europe or various Eastern European countries in particular, who have family members that have blonde hair and blue eyes, right? And then they have olive skin tones and dark hair and dark eyes, right? And so even though they are racially white, they are still the dark one. They're still darker, right? So you still see that distinction or differentiation amongst white people in terms of who's the fairest one of all. I think about Snow White, right? That classic fairy tale, right? It's like, who's the fairest one? And we know throughout history, fairness was meant both beautiful and white, right? So to be fair meant to be blonde, to be blue-eyed, but to also be beautiful, right? And so even if you read like a Shakespeare play or a Shakespeare poem, the fairness or the rosy cheeks or the blonde hair was representative of being more beautiful than even the women of the same race who had darker skin tones or had tans or olive skin tones and raven colored hair. And then the other thing to keep in mind, I say this all the time, is that race is not based in biology. Race is not a biological fact. And I know that there are even, Black people, for example, who want to kind of really hold tight to racial identity, right? And as much as I love that identity, I love Blackness with a capital B. I love being Black. I love being considered Black. I can't operate as if it is a biological fact, right? And the reason why I promote colorism as such an important conversation is because the reality, the biological reality is my melanin. It's not my racial category, right? My racial category was a made up system, a flawed system made by people that I'm actually reading White by Law by Ian Haney Lopez, right? And there's just this long history, y'all, about how race was created, why it was created, how it's used in society. It's basically just like money, right? Like a dollar bill. You see this right here? It's literally just a piece of paper, right? It's a piece of paper. The fact that I can exchange this for something, right, with a particular value amount is completely arbitrary. It's completely made up, right? And race operates in the same way. Race is currency. But what I can't change, right? So even if the value of $1 increases or decreases over time, the amount of melanin I have in my skin, regardless of what system I'm in, is going to be the same, right? So if I go to Africa, if I go to Asia, if I go to Europe, if I go to Australia, I might be viewed differently based on my race, but I will look the same wherever I go. And I think that's important because there's the debate about, should biracial people or mixed race people be considered Black, right? And maybe that should be like a separate conversation altogether, right? But I think the one drop rule was inherently racist. It was based in white supremacist ideology, right? The fact that to be white meant to be 100% pure white, and that, and that Blackness was sort of this thing that tainted white ancestry, right? And it was also based in the slaveholders' ability to enslave more people, right? So if we can make the category of Blackness bigger, then that means we have a bigger workforce that we can force into and exploit for labor and to earn income. And then even whiteness is tied to citizenship. So as people were immigrating to the United States from different countries, and that includes European countries, right? European countries, Asian countries, Middle Eastern countries, African countries. As people were immigrating to the U.S. throughout the history of the early days of this country, the courts, the laws, the leaders of the land at that time were trying to figure out who was white and who was non-white, who was white and who wasn't white. Because if you weren't white, you could not be a U.S. citizen. And so that goes for not just Black people, not just people who were enslaved in this country at that time, but that includes certain immigrant populations from the Mesoamerican, region of the world. And so over time, more and more people have been pushed into that category of whiteness, right? Whereas before they would not have been considered white. And so none of this stuff is static. None of this stuff is a given, right? It's not innate. It's not organic. It shapeshifts based on the needs of the people in power at that time, right? And so while I acknowledge that there are substantial, significant, tangible differences between me, who's not considered mixed or biracial, and someone who is, I still don't plant my flag on the territory of they can't call themselves Black, right? I think even if I say, oh, you know, we should not subscribe to the one drop rule because it was inherently racist, at the end of the day, I understand that the bigger question is not who is defined as a particular race, but it's what is your lived reality, right, within that racial space. And then there's the reality too that even Black people who are considered monoracial or who are not considered mixed are actually mixed, actually have mixed ancestry, right? My mom did the DNA test, and while I'm like 90% African ancestry perhaps, right, I technically still have some European ancestry somewhere back in there, right? And that's just from my mom's side. And so I think I think we can allow for flexibility and allow for nuance and allow for personal agency and how we identify in terms of being Black, while still acknowledging the very real, the very tangible differences and levels of privilege and levels of marginalization that happen when you have a parent who identifies as Black and a parent who identifies as white or Latinx, indigenous, Asian, right, or something else. I think, because for me, I don't know, I'm always engaged in or interested in that nuance, right, and that things are not, for lack of better words, Black or white, right? I feel like we have to get comfortable with nuance and with things being more complicated than we might be comfortable with them being. And I think that, you know, actually I read this quote on the Firefly page. We can't solve a problem from the same level of consciousness that created the problem, right? Albert Einstein. So again, we can't solve a problem from the same level of consciousness that created the problem. And so the level of consciousness that created racism and colorism in the first place is that very rigid, I want to hold on to this very finite, definite sense of identity and place, right? And I think that has not helped us as humans, right? The feeling of like, well, I have to be in this specific box and you have to be in that specific box and there are no gray areas. And you know what I mean? It's like, that is how racism has become so insidious. The problem that it has been is trying to like make finite, definite delimitations on who people are and what we are. So that was a little bit of a rant. Let me see if I have any comments or questions that came in since then. JB says, are both... I haven't been keeping up with my waves. Hello, family. I'm just living. Hey, it's good to see you. I haven't seen you in a while, I don't think. Okay. Thank you for all your work. Yes, it is my pleasure. My pleasure. All right. And so the other thing that I'll say, and again, people who are tuning in and expecting to see Tanzania Fair, she had to reschedule. So that's why I'm here just kind of speaking off the cuff about, you know, things that have come up in conversations recently. So the other thing that came up, I literally just read this in a TikTok comment before I came on live. And it was that colorism goes both ways and that dark-skinned people have co-opted the term colorism for our own insidious, right? And I've had other people like leave trolling comments on like YouTube saying that, you know, dark-skinned people are trying to take over the world and that we are secretly plotting against light-skinned people and we're out to get light-skinned folks. Like there's really a strain of light-skinned people who are, you know, promoting that concept, that conspiracy theory. And that's false. I almost feel like I shouldn't address that because it's so obviously wrong. But it's crazy to me that it keeps coming up, like that it's more than one person who believes in that conspiracy theory, right? And it's no different, right, from men who take offense to women's liberation or, you know, straight folks who get offended that gay pride month exists. Like, well, what about straight pride? And it's, it's not that light-skinned Black people in particular, or light-skinned POCs, don't experience oppression and racism, but within the system of colorism, you are the privileged one, right? As the lighter skinned person. And yes, that privilege comes with a certain level of suspicion. Just like white privilege comes with a certain level of suspicion, right? And so a lot of Black people don't feel comfortable, don't trust, don't open up easily to white people. There's a similar dynamic, right, amongst people of color, amongst African Americans, at least, I can speak to that, where a lot of darker skinned people have felt as a result of colorism that they can't be in community with light-skinned folks, right? It's difficult for them to be in community with light-skinned folks or to trust light-skinned people in general because of what they've experienced and observed within this system of colorism. But that response to colorism is not colorism. In the same way that a Black Lives Matter protest is not anti-Blackness, it's not racism, it's a response to racism, right? And so, the pushback or even the animosity or the anger or the rejection that a light-skinned person might receive from a dark-skinned person, it's not because I think you're less than me for being light-skinned. It's because I see you as part of the problem. I see you as representative of this system that has marginalized and degraded and discriminated against me and other people like me, right? And that doesn't mean it's right? I'm not saying that it should not be dealt with or handled or addressed in some way, but it's not the same as colorism. It's a different ball game. Naturalista says, what gets me is I'm not a colorist, I just prefer light skin. Can you speak to that? Oh yeah, Naturalista 2515. I like that quote all the time because people say, I just prefer light skin. And colorism is not just about rejecting darker skin, it's also preferring lighter skin. Like that's one of the definitions of colorism is a preferential treatment towards people with lighter skin tones, right? And you have to look at both sides of the coin. And that if you have a preference for light skin, that means you have a negative bias towards dark skin, right? It's you can't have one side of the coin without having the other side of the coin as well. And then I always tell people, anyone who is biased or racist or sexist or colorist, they don't feel racist, right? Like white people who are racist don't call themselves racist. They say things like, well, I just like being around people with, who share my values. I like living in a neighborhood with other good Christian middle Americans, right? Like they have all these other perceptions of why they have their preferences, when at the end of the day, it's amounts to racism. And so I say the same for colorism, right? Imagine having a white school teacher say, well, I don't have anything against black kids. I just prefer to teach white students. It's just my preference. And we would all say, well, no, teacher, you're racist. And so just because you use the word preference, that's what bias, prejudice is. Showing favoritism to one group over another, especially in the context of the fact that you don't know these people, right? So any light-skinned person, whether you know them or not, is already you're going to give them the benefit of the doubt, whereas you're automatically suspect of the darker skinned people. That's colorism. I'm Just Living says, I've been busy with life, haha, but I appreciate you so much. You are a powerhouse. Thank you. Poetic Platypus says, one thing that I notice is that when it comes to having to state one's race, there still is not a box for mixed race. It does force someone to pick one or the other. Yeah, Poetic Platypus, that's a good point. That is so interesting. It allows you to choose multiple boxes sometimes, but there's not a specific box that says mixed race. But again, that's like Ian Haney Lopez, the first book I read by him was Dog Whistle Politics, which was a more recent book, and one of his earlier books was White by Law. And so all of those check boxes have to do with legal status. Legal status. And that's why we're in this bind, right? Like, we have to do away with race as a concept, but in order to create justice in the world, we have to address race. We don't have an easy task in front of us, right? At all, by any means. But the census, for example, or the census in particular, but even like documents in terms of testing or hospitalizations and records and birth certificates and things like that. All of that is a product or a remnant, part of that legacy of the legal status based on racial classifications. And again, it benefited certain people to deny legal rights to other people. And so that practice today still shows up in the check boxes that we are asked to mark on the census, or the check boxes we're asked to mark at the hospital. But I think for a long time, you're right, Poetic Platypus, that's why so many mixed race people, especially those who were mixed with Black, right? Why so many folks chose Black for various reasons, is that if the other alternative was to choose white, like, I'm definitely not going to choose that, right? All right. Okay, cool. So I think I said all I wanted to say on those two things. It's crazy to me that people think dark-skinned people are conspiring, are like forming this coalition to take down light-skinned folks. That's a conspiracy theory that is definitely not based in any fact. And I don't know how widespread it is, right? Which is, I don't know how I would find out, like, how many people actually buy into that as a type of conspiracy theory. But it could potentially be a dangerous one if it catches on. And so I'm hoping that it's left to the relegated to the marginal portion of lighter skinned folks. And there's Juana right there. So Juana, I was telling folks about my Firefly takeover. And so this is a good reminder as I close here to join me live on Wednesday to talk about colorism in the workplace. So if you have experienced colorism in the workplace, if you have seen or witnessed colorism in the workplace, or if you've done anything to prevent colorism in the workplace, I invite you to join me on the Firefly Instagram page to share your thoughts or bring your questions and comments tomorrow at noon Central Time. But in the meantime, you can go there now and check out the starter kit that I've posted. It's 3 posts on colorism in the workplace, amongst your workforce, and with clients or customers. Poetic Platypus says, how can there be justice when our justice system is built on white supremacy? I think that question is above my pay grade, Poetic Platypus. It's a deep question. But yeah, within the existing like legal justice system, it's not built to be just for anyone other than white folks, right? It's set up, the very foundation of it is to protect the interest, the financial, economic, social interest of cishet, white, Christian landowning men, right? And so very few people in this country were part of the mission, right? To forge this new nation and to create what is called a justice system, right? And even knowing how police officers, their history is rooted in capturing runaway slaves, right? So the slave patrols, I think they were called, is how modern day policing is where modern day policing evolved from, right? Let's catch Black people who might be runaway slaves and then sell them back into slavery. And so like people say, the justice system is not broken. It's operating exactly as it was designed to operate. And that's why, when we think about the concept of revolution, it's, it's not about playing Jenga, like playing Jenga. I hope that's not a reference that's lost on people, where it's like, okay, well, let's just change this one little thing about the police force and like try to pull that out, right? Is you really do have to start from scratch to the degree that you can. I don't know what that would look like though, like starting from scratch. With so many things, with education, with the legal system at large, with how we conceive of citizenship, right? And even thinking about our relationships to other countries, right? And, funding certain groups of people to weaponize and attack folks for no reason. There was no intent to actually be just in the sense of what actual justice is. It was all built for certain people to gain more power and to gain more money. And I think that's something we have to reckon with, is that the ideals we espouse for this country were not the legitimate intention behind any of these institutions. Kalia Kaniki says, I'm from Belgium. Different context and history, same system of oppression and mechanisms. Being light-skinned myself, I am just now grappling the privilege I hold and the discomfort that implies. Yeah, it's a process that a lot of light-skinned people, when they become aware of it, and I've talked to some individuals about how painful it is to really become aware of that space of privilege. There was an article I read many, many years ago, like early when I first started researching colorism. And the name of the author escapes me, but it's definitely on my website. And one of the ways she described it amongst the lighter skinned people she was working with is survivor's guilt, a kind of survivor's guilt. And feeling this kinship, feeling this kindred connection to darker skinned people of your race or of your actual family, and yet realizing how they have suffered in ways that you did not, right? And realizing that you're given access to society in ways that they are often precluded from, and how that creates something similar to survivor's guilt. But I think, and I don't know, if there are specific avenues or routes or resources for that. I'm thinking, within white communities, we think about things like white fragility and, white tears, and how amongst white people, there has been more work around how to acknowledge your privilege, right? But for people of color, we have not been getting that work. We haven't been getting that support and how to deal with our privileges. And I say our because even though I'm not light skinned, I have other kinds of privilege, right? And so I have to be accountable for the ways that I am privileged as well. I don't think it hasn't been the same kind of like painful awakening to those privileges. I think I've kind of always been aware of those that I've had specifically. But there's not as much work for people of color to address privilege around skin tone and phenotype, right? In the way that in white spaces or white communities, people have been doing that work for a lot longer, right? Like how to help, white individuals recognize their privilege and unpack their privilege, and the privilege knapsack, right? That's been work that has been done in the white community a lot more intensely than for people of color. But I think, what your example shows that there's room for that there's a need for that as well, right? It's to support people of color, of lighter skin tones, who are dealing with the inner conflictedness of realizing or awakening to your sense of privilege. Hey, Missy Camille. So I'm not convinced people believe it. I think they just don't want to face their own privilege. So that's their way to deflect with a bizarro counterpoint. That could definitely be okay, I think I missed a lot of comments. That could definitely be the case, Missy Camille. I think some of them are like zealots though. Like they have these there's this biracial person on Twitter who infiltrated one of the groups, right? And what he did was they started trolling him, right? This very light-skinned, half black, half white individual on Twitter who is very vocal about colorism. And so they started trolling him and attacking him and like accusing him of, hating them or whatever. And so he went to one of their like monthly meetings. They actually have a group of lighter skinned people who meet on a regular basis to discuss light-skinned issues, which in one sense could be useful, right? Like if the energy were a little different, like that might actually be a useful thing. But coming from that perspective of we have to close ranks around light-skinned people so that dark-skinned people don't take over the world, like that's where it becomes gross, right? So I think it's not just like something they say in reaction to me talking about colorism. Like they are putting in the work to perpetuate this idea, right? It's very bizarre. Sangaku says, and in the North, the cops just protected the rich, but folks don't even want to bring classism in addition to race. Ooh, I love the classism piece when we talk about, Black Americans in particular, and how that's another area of privilege that a lot of Black people just ignore, right? So yeah, we have light skin privilege, but so many Black people are privileged on the basis of class, and yet they want to be, how do I say this? They want to see themselves as having the quintessential Black experience in the United States, right? And I'm like, yes, you are very much Black. You very much experience racism, but your class affords you a level of privilege that a lot of other Black people don't have, right? And it's a slippery slope because people also are reminded that just because you are rich doesn't mean you can avoid racism, right? So it's not that being rich or wealthy prevents you from experiencing racism, but it definitely does not, you do not experience racism, especially systemic, especially structural racism, in the same ways that poor or even working class Black people experience it, right? You might experience just as much interpersonal racism, just as much implicit bias, right? But, just your access to things, it's a different ball game. And then also, not even in terms of racism, but classism, Black on Black classism, right? Like within race classism, how upper middle class Black folks have separated themselves from poor Black folks. And that historically has also corresponded to skin color, right? So because historically, most of the upper middle class Black people happen to be light-skinned, they segregated themselves, and it was based on class and color, right? And we look at schools, we look at organizations. I've kind of talked about some of this before, and even neighborhoods and communities where they definitely didn't want to be associated with those Black Negroes, right? We don't want to be like those Negroes. We're not like those Negroes, right? And they were actually using the term Negro at that time. It's so much. Thank you all for participating and for, sticking with me. I had to change my plans at the last minute, so I didn't get to prepare as much as my comments. So hopefully they were easy to follow, and hopefully you got something out of it, even though it wasn't what I originally planned for today. Says, yep, the U.S. sells arms and trades foreign militaries, is sending weapons to Israel and training Cameroonian troops to terrorize Anglophones. K-drama mama says all true. Problem is within the black community, folks gaslight and say we all going through the same type of anti-blackness. 100%. It's not the same for all black people. Like, all black people experience racism, sure, but it's not the same. It's not the same. And there's nothing wrong with saying that. People think you're being divisive because you're acknowledging that it's not the same. Like, come on, people. Like, you really mean to tell me that I have the same experience as Kanye West in this country? No. All right. Stop. Are you serious? I'm ashamed of all of them. That's insane. Yeah. Oh, you're referring to the light-skinned group of people who meet. Yeah, and they have these live streams on YouTube. Don't get me started on the bougie Jack and Jill folks, the Black Greek life, AKAs, and colorism, texturism. True, it's a whole damn shame. Wonderful as always. Thank you. It was all informative and spot on. Thank you for your live today. All right, so I've come to the end of my comments. Thank you all for watching. I'll be back next week. Do I have a guest for next week? I don't know. I don't have my schedule memorized. But I'll be back regardless. You will see me either alone or with a guest. Oh, yeah, I do have someone scheduled, Esther from the Black Knowledge Society. So hopefully she'll be able to make it. All right, folks, take care. Thank you so much for hanging with me today. I was really kind of nervous because I didn't have a plan. And so I was like, well, I know I've had a few questions come up recently, so maybe I'll just speak to those. But yeah. I'll see y'all next week. Enjoy the rest of your weeks, and hopefully I'll see you Wednesday on Firefly's Instagram page for a specific conversation on colorism in the workplace. Take care. Mwah.